Steelers Nation, let me tell you, the afternoon in Chicago felt like déjà vu in the most confusing way possible. You watch this team 1 week and think they're starting to figure things out, that maybe the rhythm is finally settling in. Then you see a performance like this one and realize the same problems keep circling back around, like the season is stuck on a loop. It's not that everything went wrong. Actually, plenty went right, the same things that have gone right before. But there's no sense of growth, no feeling around the locker room that they're building toward anything. You don't hear players saying they finally cracked the code on something or found consistency in a certain area. It's just fluctuation. 1 week the offense looks coordinated. Another week the defense looks sharp. And then you land on a game like the one in Chicago, where neither side seems to hold their footing long enough for anything to matter. Naturally, the focus turns to the quarterback spot, because that's where the attention always gravitates. But watching Mason Rudolph operate, you could see he was dealing with the same issues that have haunted this group all season. The stat line looks clean at first glance. Completing roughly 3/4 of his passes is respectable, and spreading the ball around showed intent. But the air game just never gained the depth it needed. One early throw deep down the sideline felt like a chance to steal momentum, but the receiver didn't make the kind of aggressive play you expect in that moment, while the defender attacked the ball like it was meant for him. That set the tone. And from there, every attempt to stretch the field felt like the offense forcing something it didn't have the tools to execute. The ground attack, though, was a different story. Ripping off well over 100 yards on the ground should have been the foundation of everything. When you're running with that kind of efficiency, second and one shouldn't feel complicated. Third and one shouldn't feel like a gamble. Yet somehow, on those exact downs, that's when the offense called the most questionable plays. Instead of leaning on the run or quick, high-percentage throws, they kept dialing up deeper attempts that didn't match the flow of the drive. And this wasn't new. It mirrored the same puzzling decisions that cost them in earlier weeks. That's the part that gets to you, because when this offense commits to sustained drives, it works. There were 2 sequences in particular that showed just how effective they can be when they keep things simple. One opened with a long, methodical march down the entire field, chewing up almost an entire quarter while mixing runs and short passes with patience. Another late in the game came a moment when they absolutely needed points, and they delivered with a grinding, deliberate touchdown drive. Those possessions proved the formula exists. But right after those moments of clarity, it all slipped back into inconsistency. Suddenly, the offense would look unrecognizable from the unit that had just executed such cohesive series. Then there's the receiving group. With the kind of running rhythm they established, you would expect the pass catchers to complement it. Instead, the leading wideout barely cracked a few dozen yards. Others contributed in small bursts, but no one broke a route that shifted the defense or flipped the momentum. And the tight ends, usually a key part of this system, barely saw the ball despite catching everything thrown their way. It wasn't a matter of talent. It was a matter of choices, of refusing to use what was working. The frustration wasn't limited to the offense. On the defensive side, the problems felt familiar. Opponents continued to find space across the middle far too easily, to the point where some completions looked uncontested. There were snaps where the Bears lined up with 4 receivers, nothing disguised, nothing tricky, and the defense answered with a coverage that left them outnumbered right from the snap. And when that stuff keeps happening, it starts to feel less like an occasional breakdown and more like a structural issue that's followed this team from the very first game of the season. Pre-snap penalties didn't help either. Some of the most damaging moments were self-inflicted. One wiped out a long Rudolph run that could have pushed them into tying range late in the game. Instead of marching forward, they were marched backward for a mistake that should never happen that deep into a season. And it wasn't an isolated incident. There were multiple penalties that undercut momentum before drives even began. Special teams didn't offer relief, with some short field punts that handed the Bears better opportunities than they deserved. In tight matchups, little things like that accumulate into big consequences. And they did. Even a late game decision making turn heads. Standing near midfield with just seconds left, you could see the chance for a long field goal attempt. It wasn't ideal, but it was within the realm of possibility. A seasoned kicker with a strong leg had shown all afternoon that he could reach that distance. Instead, the offense stayed on the field and tried to generate a miracle that wasn't aligned with how the game had unfolded. When the dust settled, the chance they had was never used. The explanation afterward didn't clarify much, and you could sense the frustration from fans who felt they never got to see the opportunity that at least gave them hope. Walking into the locker room after a game like that, you expect disappointment. But hearing players speak, you could also sense the weight of repetition. They've seen this pattern too many times. Moments of brilliance overshadowed by a self-sabotage. When a defensive player scores a touchdown and still sounds like all the air has left the room, that tells you how draining this cycle has become. You can hear the determination, but you can also hear the urgency creeping in because they know the standings have shifted and the margin for error is closing fast. And that brings up the biggest question the team faces right now. When the season reaches this stage and the standings tighten, can they find an identity quickly enough? They've shown flashes of one. They've shown they can pound the ball on the ground, mix in short, efficient passes, control the clock, and let the defense play from ahead. But instead of building on that foundation, they keep drifting away from it. Deep shot after deep shot, even on downs where all they need is a yard, keeps breaking the rhythm. And now that the quarterback change has proven the decisions weren't just coming from one player, it's clearer than ever that this is a bigger philosophical issue. That's what made this loss sting in a different way. It wasn't simply the score. It was the realization that the path to winning this particular game existed. It was right there, spelled out in the 2 long touchdown drives and the dominant rushing performance. It was sitting on the field, waiting for them to lean into it. Yet they move away from it again and again, right into the same mistakes that have stopped them all season. What makes this whole situation even more frustrating for Steelers fans is that the identity they keep searching for isn't some complicated mystery. It's not a blueprint that requires months of reconstruction or a complete overhaul of the roster. It's right there in front of them, visible every time they commit to physical drives, control the flow of the game, and force the opponent to adjust. But somewhere between quarters, somewhere between one possession and the next, that plan evaporates. You watch them run the ball with power and confidence, gain steady yards, we're down the defensive line, and then suddenly everything shifts toward deep throws that feel disconnected from everything that was working. And it's not about being conservative. It's not about avoiding risk. It's about understanding when the risk is unnecessary, especially in situations where the opponent is daring you to take the easy yards. There were moments in Chicago when you could see the offensive line carving lanes with authority, creating the kinds of gaps that make a running back feel like he's driving through open roadway instead of defenders. When an offense piles up almost 200 yards on the ground, it sends a message. It says the trenches are being dominated. It says you found something that the defense can't quite solve. And usually, in football, when you find something the other side can't stop, you keep going back to it until they prove they can. But that didn't happen. Instead, the approach shifted like a team intent on proving a point rather than securing a win. Deep attempts, even with defenders draped on receivers. Low percentage plays when all they needed was a yard or two. It was as if the offense was fighting against its own strengths. And what made the decisions look even stranger was how effective the short passing game had been on the drives that actually resulted in touchdowns. Rudolph showed control, composure, and timing on those series. He wasn't forcing anything. He was taking what the defense handed him, moving the chains, and making smart throws underneath. You could picture an entire game built around that identity. You could envision an offense that leans on the run to set up manageable passes, an offense that plays through rhythm instead of desperation. But outside of those successful drives, it was as if the play sheet flipped to an entirely different philosophy. Defensively, it wasn't any easier to explain. There were snaps where the secondary looked completely lost in space, where entire routes ran through open gaps without anyone trailing closely enough to matter. And these weren't complicated routes. These weren't disguised formations. Some of the completions across the middle looked so uncontested that fans were left shaking their heads, wondering how it kept happening. When the Bears lined up with 4 receivers stacked across the line, the Steelers matched it with coverage that was outnumbered before the ball even left the center's hands. Watching that unfold again and again, after seeing similar issues all season, made it clear that this wasn't about one bad matchup or a single miscommunication. It was recurring, deeply rooted, and costly. Then you add in the self-inflicted wounds. The pre-snap penalties have become their own theme this year, a quiet sabotage that keeps undermining perfectly good opportunities. The canceled run that would have given them prime field position late in the game wasn't just a mistake on paper. It was a moment that changed the entire arc of the final minutes. Instead of pushing into scoring range, they were suddenly pushed backward, scrambling to regain footing. Those are the moments where discipline matters, where focus matters, where the details separate winning from losing. And this team hasn't been on the right side of those details nearly enough. Special teams didn't offer the stabilizing presence they needed either. When punts come off the foot at awkward angles or short distances and hand the opponent a shorter field, the ripple effect is immediate. A defense already struggling with coverage breakdowns suddenly has less grass to defend. A momentum shift becomes even harder to prevent. And for a team that plays in so many close games, those small miscues stack up fast. But the late-game decision that puzzled almost everyone came down to that final chance at a long field goal. The distance wasn't ideal, but it wasn't impossible. And in situations like that, you usually lean on your specialist, especially when he's shown he has the leg for it. Instead, the moment drifted by without the attempt, and fans were left wondering whether the team even recognized the opportunity they had. Afterward, the explanation didn't offer much clarity. It felt more like a door abruptly closed rather than an honest breakdown of what went into the decision. Through all of this, the atmosphere in the locker room carried a familiar tone, one that sits somewhere between frustration and resolve. Players know when a game slips away because the opponent was simply better. They can live with that. But when a game slips away because of repeated patterns, preventable mistakes, and an identity crisis, that hits differently. You could hear it in the cadence of their voices. You could see it in the way they answer questions, not angry, but searching, trying to figure out why the same issues keep circling back no matter how many adjustments they attempt. Still, there's a strong sense that the team hasn't lost confidence, even if the patience is wearing thin. Several players talked about the need to put all three phases together, something they actually haven't done since the early weeks of the season. And that's the truth of it. This team has shown flashes on offense, flashes on defense, flashes on special teams, but rarely all at once. They'll win a game where the defense dominates. Then they'll win another where the offense wakes up. But blending those performances into a complete four-quarter identity has been elusive. As the standings tightened and the division picture shifted, the urgency grew louder. The team that once sat comfortably near the top suddenly found itself slipping, not because they were outmatched physically, but because the consistency never came. The loss in Chicago wasn't just another mark on the record. It was a reminder that the season has reached the point where every decision carries weight, where every missed opportunity inches the margin thinner, where every penalty or coverage lapse becomes something you feel in the standings the next morning. But before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and hit the like button on this video. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the Pittsburgh Steelers. And don't forget to share your thoughts on the news in the comments below. The rumor mill is buzzing, and Steelers fans might want to hold on to their helmets. There's talk of a new defensive beast arriving in Pittsburgh, and sources suggest he's nothing short of monstrous. Whispers from inside the organization hint that the team has quietly secured a defender whose combination of size, speed, and sheer instinct has scouts and rival teams alike scrambling to recalibrate their game plans. If the chatter is true, this could be a game-changing addition to a defense that's been looking for an electrifying presence to disrupt offenses from the first snap. Scouts describe him as a force of nature, a player who seems to anticipate plays before they even develop. Rumors say he's the type who can read a quarterback like an open book and close gaps with alarming efficiency. Fans on social media are already buzzing with speculation, dissecting every clip of his previous highlights, marveling at the bone-crushing tackles and imagining what it would be like to see him storm the line at Heinz Field. Some insiders hint that his arrival could completely alter the Steelers' defensive schemes, giving the coaching staff options they didn't have before: blitzes from unexpected angles, shutdown coverage, and a new edge of intimidation that could rattle even the most composed quarterbacks. The intrigue only grows because details remain murky. No official statements, no press conferences, just enough leaks to make the imagination run wild. Could he become the missing puzzle piece that turns a good defense into a feared one? Observers suggest his presence alone could energize the locker room, elevating young talent and creating a culture of relentless pressure that opponents dread. Pittsburgh's fan base is already speculating about what this could mean for the team's identity. Could this mark the beginning of a new defensive dynasty, or is it just the start of a season filled with high expectations and tantalizing what-ifs? Whether he will live up to the hype is still an open question, but the buzz is undeniable. For now, the city waits, holding its breath, imagining a monster on the field, and hoping the rumors are real. One thing is certain: if these whispers are even half true, the Steelers' defense is about to get a lot scarier. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Pittsburgh Steelers, make sure to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and give this video a like. We always look forward to hearing your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.